Indeed, Watinta Bafazi, Watinta Imbogoto. And a shout out to our Imbogoto that are joining us, Elizabeth, Pamela, Ritabile, Bongi, Refilwe. I see you ladies. And just to mention, we are launching that exciting program for women, and we'll be talking about that later on, so please do stay tuned. I see a comment here from Sipo, who was asking that I repeat the program lineup for today. So I just want to let you know, on your Slido app, if you click on, so if you scroll a little up to the top of the screen, you'll see a picture of a house. If you click on the house, it'll take you to the main page, and if you scroll through the main page, you'll be able to see our guest lineup for the day, our first panel discussion, which I'm going to introduce shortly, which is Rise Up SA, and then our keynote address afterwards, as well as our master classes that are coming up, and then all the way through to our final panel for the day on accessing finance. And then right at the bottom of that page, you can then click join session, which will take you back into our chat, and you can continue commenting within the chat section and using that chat function, but also putting in your questions there as well. And I'm hoping you will be listening as we go into our panel discussion now, and put in your questions and I will pose them to the panel. And our first panel for today is around Rise Up SA, and it's the response during this COVID crisis. And we're going to be hearing from some incredible entrepreneurs and business owners who've done phenomenal work in this time. So I'd like to invite to join me on stage, firstly, Ms. Hepsy Mkhungo, who is the founder and CEO of One Linkage. She has over 10 years experience with various JSE listed companies. She's an executive and manager in the space of advisory, positioning, strategy, planning, and development of economic development solutions and programs that have contributed to job creation and improving business skills. My second panelist is Ms. Lynette Ntuli. She is the founder and CEO of Innate Investment Solutions, which is a professional services firm that provides property, asset, and infrastructure development and management solutions. She has a passion for diversity, inclusivity, and socioeconomic development, and this is evidenced by her awards that she's received from multi-industry and business awards. And then our final panelist joining us is Selebogo Molefe, who's better known as Dr. Life's Good. He is a maker, creator, innovator, and CEO and co-founder of the Hookup Dinner. He is a co-founder and shareholder of the People's Fund, as well as CEO of Life's Good Global Investments. So please help me welcome to the stage, and you can drop hands in the chat section so we can see you clapping. Please welcome to the stage my panelists as they come up to join me. All right, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. How's everyone doing this morning?
Great.
Great. I love the colors, the color combination. It's fabulous. One of my things about winter is like finding good things to wear, and I love how you ladies have showed up. Hepsy, I'm going to hand over to you because I understand you have a presentation for us. So we'll go through your presentation, and then we'll go into our panel discussion for today. Okay. Over to you.
Thank you, Nziki. Thank you for everything. Thank you, Sasol, for this platform. Good morning, everyone, particularly the SMEs. I hope this session will help you navigate Sasol better than you've done before. So, as mentioned, my name is Hepsy Mkhungo. I'm the founder and CEO of Linkage, the platform that we use to integrate small businesses into supply chains. So I'm going to give you just a bit of history around Linkage. So Linkage is a digital platform that is designed from a corporate perspective to try and integrate small businesses into a supply chain. Now, this is very important in that typically there's not just one person in a corporate where you can access that particular corporate. It's typically a myriad of people who are in different divisions, and in most cases, they work in isolation of each other. So you find it very difficult to navigate that environment. So what we've done is to make it easy to make sure that from an internal perspective, there is a cohesive approach towards supporting small businesses, depending on the department that you're in. So you could be in a department that is providing opportunities. You could be in a department that's providing finance or funding for small businesses, or just development. The point is that in the corporate environment, they all work mostly in silos. So we're trying to make sure that they have a cohesive front when they speak to small businesses, to enable small businesses to know exactly where to go. And it's transparent, which is quite important. So you know that from a government perspective, they do have the e-tenders portal, which is quite transparent for everyone, but we don't have something similar in the private sector. So we're building the platform to provide that. So that's basically what Linkage is. So it has about 3 main interfaces. There's an interface from a small business perspective, an interface from ESG practitioners who are given the mandate to support small businesses from either funding perspective or development. And then there are third parties that tend to support these departments. So that's basically the second element. Then the third element is your supply chain. How do we access those very, very important opportunities? We can't be developed forever, right? So at some point in time, we need the opportunities. And if these 2 divisions don't work together, it becomes very difficult to navigate that. So the SME module looks at how we onboard small businesses into this platform so that they're easily accessible and visible to the corporates. The outcome of this onboarding is the grading of the small businesses. So you typically hear from a corporate that, but we don't know who they are. We don't know what they're capable of doing. So how then do we know that we have the right partners? What level of development do they require? So the grading allows us to say, having tested and screened these individuals and understood who they are gradings between blue, bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. Each grade is a combination of the points that are given as you onboard. So what happens with that grading is that it comes with a growth plan. And this growth plan gives an indication of what type of support do you require to move within the layers until you are visible to supply chain. So it gives comfort to the corporate. You also know exactly where you are. The process is transparent for everybody to see. So that's the intention of that. Then the last part, of course, is that those elusive opportunities from a procurement perspective. Okay, now I'm ready. I am graded platinum or gold or whatever that is. Can I please see the opportunities? So this is an opportunity for supply chain managers or buyers to go to one single place to then share opportunities. And once you share these opportunities, at least it's a transparent process. You know exactly what's coming. You know the requirements. You can also identify whether can I then respond to this. Once you're ready, then you know that you can respond to those opportunities. So that's basically the interface of Linkage. So during the recent civil unrest, we felt that we could do something with the platform. And the challenge that we faced was that from a government perspective, there are platforms that provide that type of centralized support. But what happens to corporates who also require a centralized point to go and identify small businesses? And typically corporates have specific requirements. This is from a FICA requirement, from compliance, so they can't short-circuit that type of information. So our view was that since we have the platform, we can open up the onboarding component of that platform at no cost to corporates or SMEs. The entire point was we want to mobilize support for these SMEs who've been affected. So with that, we've been able to mobilize a number of corporates. And thank you, Sasol, for being a champion and the first one to come on board. What we've done, we've had a number of corporates who've said, we're raising our hands. We are going to support SMEs who either need stock, equipment, a combination of grant and loan funding, any other infrastructure support that they require. So we are now in the process of screening those businesses. The outcome of that screening is that we are going to have a needs report that goes to a corporate. That corporate will then incorporate that report per SME into their normal channels of enterprise and supply development. So we believe that with Rise Up SA, we've been able to make sure that those 2 parties meet and they can benefit from each other. So as I've mentioned, the process will probably end around September. We have done the application processes. We are now screening and verifying those businesses to make sure that the claims are valid. We are going to conduct a needs assessment, and then the reports, and then, of course, then the corporate matching happens. And by the time it happens, a corporate would have sufficient file with all the required documents to engage that SME to make sure that on their side that they can validate the claims as well. So far, as I've mentioned, we have quite a lot of SMEs who have already onboarded into the platform. We are going to now conduct the matching at the end of, before end of September. I think that is Linkage and Rise Up. So thank you very much, Sasol, for partnering with us on the Rise Up.
Thank you very much. I think that's absolutely incredible. It's so wonderful to see such timely responses, especially when entrepreneurs need them the most. And I'm sure there's plenty of questions in the chat about that. So we'll come back to the details of those questions. I'd just like to bring in our other panelists in the discussion. So Lynette, I want to give you an opportunity just to share a bit of your introduction, but specifically I want to find out from you, you know, one of the wonderful things that you did during the unrest and the pandemic as well was to kind of be instrumental in mobilizing resources to support entrepreneurs. You know, so firstly, I just want to find out from you, in the context of the crisis, what has been your experience, you know, and how have, you know, things been for you from a business perspective, and also then what motivated you to mobilize resources for entrepreneurs?
Well, thank you very much, Ntuli. As luck would have it, I actually live in Durban. And I very much found myself at the epicenter of that civil unrest in that just harrowing week. And, you know, by the Sunday and the Monday, we pretty much had a very good idea that a lot of the township economy, you know, in and around not just the city of Durban, but also some of the larger economic hubs around the province, had been decimated by then. And obviously it was a lot of the looting that was particularly geared at your retail shopping centers. What I think the rest of the country saw, and was probably perhaps the more alarming elements of it, was what started to happen particularly from Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning, onwards into the rest of the week, where we saw a lot of large-scale infrastructure installations, Durban Harbour, for instance, reservoirs, the distribution centres. We saw the force majeures from all the major fuel, gas suppliers as well also begin to take place that week. And that, of course, plunged, you know, the province specifically into a crisis. It was a very interesting and very challenging experience for myself personally. And personally because, you know, we often assume there's so much convenience, access, and ease around us. Nothing was more difficult, for instance, that week than finding fresh goods and products, because at that stage, you haven't just destroyed and decimated the ability of formal businesses that are based in your shopping centers or in your main economic nodes, but also now your informal traders and the like as well are no longer able to trade. So you're not able to find any fresh products. You know, for nearly 2.5, 3 weeks, we couldn't access cash in the city because, you know, your major CIT companies would not fill ATMs, or ATMs had been destroyed as part of the looting. So it's very interesting having money in the bank, no Woolworths or Pick n Pay able to deliver groceries to your door, not being able to access cash to potentially access whatever you know, just goods and products you needed, now almost on a black market, as it were, and from traders who are now only specifically taking cash items. And so what that does to you personally is it immediately faults and almost trips your mind into, what do I do for my family? How do I make sure my community of people have everything they need? Fuel, food, and the like. But then more than that, from a business interruption perspective, and as somebody who runs a business in that particular city, there is then the added stress of, you know, trying to work through Monday, Tuesday, and sort of the Wednesday. And outside, everybody else is on Teams meetings, and outside it's gunfire, not just in the townships, but also even in the suburbs and in the main economic nodes. Buildings are blowing up as they are also burning. Insurers are on the line and trying to assess, you know, what's going on. And we had very little support on the ground from our state security agencies. And I'll say that because we really only saw their presence round about Friday, I think, when the president arrived in the city for the first time. But by then, there had already been a good 50 billion rands worth of damage done. Now, for large established businesses and larger established businesses and businesses that are able, to integrate processes, systems, risk management into their infrastructure, you'll typically find they're insured. You'll typically find they know exactly what SASRIA is about. You'll typically find that even if they employ 2 or 3 people, those people are on a formal payroll system. They can now access, for instance, the UIF TERS that is now available whilst they rebuild. But for many, 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 many of our smaller businesses that had already taken the devastation of the pandemic, then subsequent to that have had to deal with multiple shutdowns and lockdowns, have had to deal with just a very depressed economy, and then on top of that have to now deal with the destruction of what little infrastructure they had in many instances. Many of those small businesses, when they need to look at their line items in terms of their overheads, will typically cut line items such as insurance cover and business continuity risk cover and all the fancy almost type of cover that in a circumstance much like this would actually help them rebuild and go on. And so what began to happen obviously is, I work with many people in the province, and obviously you just begin to hear everybody's stories of devastation. Friends, who have run engineering companies over the last 15 to 20 years who have them completely razed to the ground. Another friend had 3 petrol stations razed to the ground and had to let go of 200 people. That's 200 breadwinners. And, as you become exposed to that, you soon realize, and I mean in our communities, as people with medical practices who are now saying, guys, just help me. I'm looking for specific pieces of equipment, and if you know anybody in the community who may have them, please can I have them back, because I have clients, patients who are dying without access to that equipment. And I think what soon then happened from there is, because it almost looked so, apocalyptic if you watched it on TV. It was almost unbelievable. It was almost like watching 9/11 all those years ago, 20 years ago on TV, on CNN, and thinking, what premiere and what trailer of what movie is this? But once you were in it, you also soon realized that help wasn't arriving soon enough. And I think what was also wrong is that in our SME ecosystem, we're not very strong on building databases and integrating that data so that when we do either have a crisis or something to respond to, we can quickly access both analytics and information and know exactly who to go to in the ground to gather the right information, resources, and the right minds in order to collaborate to move things to the next thing. So every time there is a crisis, you find our SME sector having to do the same thing again. New databases, new processes, new programs, and so it goes. And we found that was similarly the issue. Of course, in sort of the second and third week, I began to get the calls. Okay, we're starting to put things together. Who needs help? Because much to Hepsy's point, one of the big issues we often have when we look at our larger institutional partners, whether it's the DFIs, the banks and the like, or even our corporates in South Africa, the big question, and that's always sort of been asked around the issue of ESD in our country, is we don't know where to find them. Really? Where are they? Are they as organized as we need them to be? Without a recognition that often small businesses, may not necessarily have the hierarchies, the processes, and the systems that very large institutions do, but they deliver the services, they deliver the goods, they turn over cash, and they are contributors to this economy in many, many different facets, whether it's the move of goods and trade, whether it's providing services to others, employing others, and the like. And so around that, really, I just posted and just said, hey guys, if you've been affected, let me know, put it on your timeline, tell other people, and that completely blew up. And I think what that was really about, much to Hepsy's point, was saying to those who are now looking to help, here are the people who have been devastated. They are here in their life. They don't need any new training. They don't need any new program and process. These are people who, up until Sunday, the 9th of July, had running sustainable, feasible businesses. And right now, their sole concern is reopening those businesses and being able to trade again so that they can recover from what's happened in this last month. How do we get them back on their feet? And that has really been my interest really then over the last month, is saying, don't try to do anything. These people knew what they were doing up until that date. Now let's just help them plug and play, get windows up, clean premises, get security if they need it, get that laptop that was taken during the riots. If you lost your oxygen tanks in a medical practice, let's get Afrox and the like to get those delivered on site and get those people trading again. Because I think 4 lockdowns in, this country, we're always living on different levels, different stages, waves. We're just cruising and it's just vibes, as it were. SMEs in the country and the entire ecosystem, simply after this last incident, probably has no more resilience or bounce back left.
Yeah.
2 years, 3 years, in fact, from my economic recession almost of 2019. To go on and to contribute at the levels that I think the whole country looks to SMEs to do in terms of the economic recovery of the country overall. So that's really the role one has found themselves playing while trying to also restore our own business and the like during this period as well.
Yeah, thank you for that finger on the pulse review. It's kind of like, I think for the people who are a little bit detached because they were watching it on TV, it's really nice to have that perspective of somebody who is in it but also directly affected by it. And I think that finger on the pulse is getting people also to understand what is actually happening. I think oftentimes people kind of miss the amount of gaps SMEs actually fill and the number of families that they support. So just because they don't have 10,000 employees, people kind of miss where they fill in and who they're supporting and how integral that is. Selebogo, I know you also are an entrepreneur who's been on the different side of the unrest. And I want to find out from you, firstly, just to give you the opportunity for people who haven't come across THUD and the People's Fund, just to let us know what you guys do, but also what has your experience been with the unrest?
Lynette said a mouthful. And she pointed out some serious points, especially in terms of what we are going through on the ground. As to what that is, we are a platform or a community of entrepreneurs that believe in helping each other. So we connect on the ground. We believe very much in grassroots entrepreneurship and helping people to get their ideas up and running, and not just through kumbaya support, but actually giving them money through community-centric opportunities. On the People's Fund side, I think that was one of the things that was given birth to through collaborations with other players in the ecosystem. We found ourselves crowdfunding, and where we settled was in purchase order funding. Yeah. That was the pivot that we found ourselves in, and it's been a beautiful journey. It's been hard. Every week trying to raise money and satisfying investors, and then after taking their money, trying to make sure that they get their money back so that we can go back to them again and ask for more money. We found ourselves just transacting just over 250 million rand in purchase order funding and helping just over 1,000 entrepreneurs in that space. And that becomes the pipeline into the People's Fund. And on the other side, we started something called the People's Stokvel. We just got recently got approved to be a CFI, which is a cooperative financial institution, meaning we can borrow money amongst ourselves as members and help businesses to further grow. What we did last year was start a new initiative called franchising Stokvel. So we're constantly looking for ways to, how do we utilize the community around us to fund ideas and get a return of some sort back. We started it during the pandemic. It was during level 5 lockdown. And to our surprise, within a month, we had raised R1 million just from the crowd, and we used a platform called Stokvel, so we've got partnerships going on there. And the idea was, how do we stop complaining and doing the calculator thing on social media where we say, if 1,000 blacks each contributed R1 would, I get really tired of that narrative, and it irks me. So I'm that person who wants to do something about it. And this time around, we found ourselves raising R1 million, and we said, look, how about we democratize access to the franchising space, specifically in quick service restaurants, And we bought our first franchise in December with 100 shareholders in there. They're actually called members, not shareholders, because it's a cooperative. So the entire thing that we're trying to solve for is how do we take a simple Stokvel, which cannot own assets, and turn it into a vehicle that can own assets and create value for its members. And the byproduct of that being able to employ family members, being able to source from within members in terms of products, anything that you can get from that. So we launched our first store in December. It was a big hoo-ha. By the way, that store is closed. We closed it last of last week. And that one is in the suburbs. So due to the pandemic and everything else, and the learning curve. So we went through our failure phase there, and we are relocating into a township, and we're still just going through our legal challenges around that. We launched a second store with a second group of people, about 135 people. We raised about 2.1 million rand. That was in Soweto, in Meadowlands. We are on the ground. We're experiencing some of the most exciting things that I've ever seen out there, and being the first time in retail for us, it's been quite a journey. We saw ourselves in the first month do over 300K in revenue, and we knew that, okay, the market is in the township. But with that, we also realized that there's a lot more. There's crime, there's high levels of crime, so the amount of investment that we ended up having to put in was nothing like what we had raised for. So we went back into the learning curve all over again. We've been entrepreneurs for so long in what we are doing. And then the nail in the coffin was what happened, And with that, we had thought we stood a chance because we are part of the community and people have been seeing this and they know that some of the members who own the store are part of that community. In fact, the employees come from those communities. But it's never enough, right?
It's never enough.
Whether it was engineered or not, it's a story for another day. But we are here, and we've gone through our depressive moments, and now we are rising again. And the question has been, how do we rebuild? And how do we rebuild differently? How do we make sure that we've got a community-centric approach more than what we thought we had, right? It's nice to talk about it on social media and stuff, but how do we actually get on the ground and make sure that people are included in the conversations? People realize that by taking ownership of the journey that they are in, it solves problems for them. We are not really in the business of selling food, when I really think about it. We are in the impact space of making sure that people are employed in those communities and they're employed through sustainable businesses. And part of our security thinking is let the community take care of the assets that we are investing in as a collective. So we are going through that process. We're very fortunate that we followed through the proper process around insurance, but having traded for only 1 month and only having paid 1 premium.
Just as luck would have it.
We're being told stories there just around how much we can claim for.
Yeah.
And we are trying to leverage what is existing out there. Platforms like Linkage, it came at the right time. So we are going through those motions. One of the things that we are picking up, and which I would like to encourage corporates around, especially corporate professionals who are trying to solve for this problem, is that just take a step back and think about how you want to help. It's one thing wanting to dive in and say, I want to help here, I want to assist in whatever form. But the average business that has been running, or the people that are running those businesses, we're not born yesterday. We did not start business just yesterday. We've been running these things, and we've invested millions into what we are doing. So when you come out with a 50,000 rand budget and you say you're assisting SMEs, we just look at you. And I'm saying this, calling out a couple of platforms that I'm currently seeing, especially around government initiatives. There's a lot of that where there's this thinking, and I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it comes from lack of insights. It's highly possible that you think you're treating small business owners like children. And it's a very wrong way to treat business owners, because these are breadwinners. These are people who are employing other people. And the SME sector is the only sector that can actually grow. Corporates are built to make sure that they start consolidating, they actually retrench, right? But SMEs have the opportunity to employ more people. So if you're going to assist them properly. Just do it properly. If it costs R1 million, give them the R1 million, And don't say you need to go through a couple of steps and hoops and whatever. We understand there's a compliance side of things that need to happen, and let's follow it through. But let's make sure that we are not part of the problem of creating more red tape in that process, because then people just give up.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing is, we're the same people who pay tax. So when you're seeing funds being put out there, but they're not being put out in the right way or in a way that is understood by small business owners, it becomes a challenge. And
Yeah.
you get disinterested people.
Yeah, and I think that echoes Lynette's point around, that last stroke of resilience where people are just like, I'm tired now. That was kind of the last thing. And so I'm very interested, so you're in a unique position that, THUD has been running, and then you've kind of been able to build subsequent businesses on top of that. And it's been about leveraging the communities. It's been about understanding the entrepreneurs, and I think that's a big piece of information that's missing.
Yeah.
That it looks different when you're supporting idea stage entrepreneurs versus those who are ready to scale versus those who are growing. With you being an entrepreneur and working with entrepreneurs, for someone who's listening, what are the practical rebuilding steps? So someone's going to go, this is a great session, I'm so excited, and they're going to leave. What do they do tomorrow morning? That's a practical way to start rebuilding.
I think you've got to ask yourself, can you be trusted?
Yep.
Have you built your name in a way that people can help you, and they know that if they help you, they're going to see results? Trust is a critical component of this, and I don't see a lot of entrepreneurs focusing on this aspect. In fact, you are going to go through failure. Failure is a part of the journey. In fact, entrepreneurs who have failed come out better on the other side, right? Now, if you have failed and maybe you've wronged some people, including your corporate partners who've assisted you in the journey, make sure that you pick up the phone and you go and do right. Without doing restitution, it becomes hard for anybody else to assist you. Why? Because it's a very small circle.
Yeah.
We think it's big, it's not. Everybody knows everybody in the space, and people talk. In fact, if an entrepreneur needs to be assisted, I'll hear somebody from corporate give me a phone call, or they give Lynette a phone call and be like, hey, do you know so-and-so? Are they okay? Or, and that is such a critical thing. So be trustworthy. I cannot stress that enough. For me, it's the foundation.
Yeah.
The reason I'm able to raise money so easily from ordinary people on the streets is because I can be trusted.
Yes, it's
I've
a
shown
reputation that you have
exactly,
that you've been able to build over the years.
And you must be consistent with it. This is why I can openly talk about our failures. We've got a store that is owned by 100 people that has failed. You must communicate that. Don't wait until it's too late. Make sure that people understand the process. Educate people about the process of what's going on. And then take the time to invest in your business just by communicating with your stakeholders, your key stakeholders around you. Like, tell them what's going on. Ask for help. And half the time, you actually don't need money. You need resources. And those resources exist. Whether it's just specialized knowledge around what you're trying to do and you're failing or you're not reaching the right expertise because you don't have the money, you can't afford it, there's somebody who's willing to assist you for free, by the way. But ask.
Yeah.
In asking, make sure that then you also pass it on to somebody else. Quite often what we see is that people then try to hog information for themselves. They also try and hog a space. Don't do that.
Yeah, it's challenging the mindset. There's enough to go around. There's enough seats at the table. There's new tables that we're creating. And what I'm hearing from you is that audit and then ask. So for the entrepreneurs joining us is think about where you're at. Do a quick audit of, where do you come from? What things can you quickly set in place and shift and make them correct? And then go forward and then ask for assistance from the next person. Hepsy, I want to come back to you. I think from a corporate perspective, someone might say, okay, yes, my business is together. I've got good relationships. I just need the next thing. What are corporates looking for in SMEs? How does an SME position themselves that makes them the most attractive, platinum status for corporates to want to support and invest in?
Yes. So I think the first thing is that as a business, you must know and understand your business. It's very important. There are simple questions around the process that you take towards just building and growing your own business. So you need to be very comfortable with those discussions, because that becomes almost the recruitment phase where people want to understand to what extent do you understand your business. And if you want us to provide a customized solution towards you and your unique problems, you need to take ownership of that and say, instead of being put into this sausage machine, I know exactly what I want. I'll give an example. I was raising funding for Linkage. And of course, there is an entire process that you must follow, one step, second step, third step. So it was incumbent upon me to say, hold on, I know exactly what I want. This is what I'm looking for. This is what you get from it if you invest in me. And all the other stuff I'm not really quite keen on, purely because they're not helping me go towards the direction I want to take. So corporates want to hear from you around what you need, because you know your business best.
Yeah.
So you can't also just accept what you've been given and not interrogate it. And then at the end, you want to complain about the process. It's really up to you to say, Sasol, thank you so much for your help, but I'll tell you from an operational perspective, this is what I need. From a talent perspective, this is what I need. By the way, you have such a set of skills in your organization that can help me from a technical perspective. How about maybe you provide me with this particular skill set? So you have to be very confident about your own business for them to put trust in you.
No, thank you. I just want to take you a few steps back. So I see there's a question here from Ayanda, and she's asking around financial information that's expected for linkage, right? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs perhaps don't ask for help because they're scared that they might not be good enough or have all the information that they need.
Yes.
For a platform like Linkage, and I think in general when you're working with corporates, what is the basic housekeeping that people need to have together to be able to present their businesses and that actually shows that they know what their business is about?
I think compliance with statutory requirements is quite critical.
Yeah.
This is very important in that we need to know that you are a responsible business. You're paying your taxes. If you're not, how can we help you with that part of it? You need to make sure that you're registered. If you're informal, it's not to say that we're not going to support you, but we need to understand what do we need for us to be able to put you in a position that formalizes you. So from a finance perspective, some of these are FICA related. They're even outside of the corporate because they have to be audited themselves. So you need to make sure that you enable and make that process very easy for them. Otherwise, then they are unable to position you in a friendly environment. I mean, corporates, having been on the inside as well, I appreciate the challenges that they face when it comes to dealing with small businesses. So we constantly have to try and make sure we balance the needs of corporate and balance the needs of small businesses. So what I don't want SMEs to always walk away with is the fact that, oh, well, I didn't have the documents. Apply anyway, because what we tend to do with Linkage is to engage SMEs to see, you have a gap here and a gap there. Could we help you maybe close those gaps so that we can position you well? So I think they mustn't worry much about what they don't have at this point in time. If they don't have it, there's a different pool for that, and we'll support that pool.
That's great. I like the broad approach, because I think it's important that we understand that different entrepreneurs are at different stages and they require different things, and to not lock them out just because they are informal, they haven't registered, or they don't have trading information. And I see that often where someone's been in business for 5, 10 years, but they've just never done the housekeeping around keeping their financials, but they are running a good business. Lynette, I want to come back to you and just, I think what I find most interesting about, the journey that you were part of is what you were able to see in the process of mobilizing. And I'm curious what that process kind of taught you. What did you see around where entrepreneurs actually are and what they need and what we should be doing differently?
I think the first, and I think it's something that, Ziggy, often our institutions and often even our corporates do typically highlight as a challenge are the issues related to governance, systems, and processes. And I think, because so many of small businesses in South Africa, and I mean, small businesses in South Africa, it's the home-based type of business where you've got auntie who's baking cakes at home, to the young graphic designer who's working off his laptop and servicing different people on a freelance basis, to the guy who has a small industrial site where he's perhaps building furniture, to the Lebu who's got a shop in a retail center. Because there are so many different categories and segments of small businesses, I think what we all need to be really cognizant of is that even in the application of, shall we call it help and assistance, shall we call it platforms and resources for SMEs, it's just that understanding that SMEs come in all manner of shapes and forms. And, getting a business, perhaps the most difficult building block in building a sustainable business is that implementation of processes and systems. And because so many of our businesses in South Africa are typically founded almost on survival as opposed to intent and design, which is something that, elsewhere, I think in the first world, that we typically look up to when we're drawing up our SME models and our case studies. In South Africa, with unemployment and just the need to survive, many of those businesses are founded on survival. And when survival and the premise of survival is almost the foundation of what you start, you know, almost these very technical, sophisticated, and very higher level thinking processes like systems and governance are things you will get to when you need to.
Yeah.
But for the purposes of today, I need to keep the lights on, water coming out the tap, my family fed, and my 1 to 3 employees paid and sustained. And then, of course, crisis, as it has, hit us in the last 2 years, strikes. And now suddenly all the people that you need to be reliant on to help you want that sophistication that you shelved to survive. And so for me, my experience on the ground has been to say, if you intend to help, please also first do the deep work of understanding the ecosystem, the constructs, the structural inefficiencies, not just the efficiencies, the inefficiencies that you hope to address. So that when you set up a platform and when you set up resources to help, you are actually being responsive to a need in community, in society, to socioeconomic challenges and gaps, as opposed to responding to your own want to be seen as a responsible corporate citizen or a responsible, ESG practitioner or SRI or whatever it is that your scorecard says. Because that is the only way, when it's particularly we talk about the leg of transformation in terms of ESD and even our social responsibility projects in the country, that we will turn the country around. When we respond to the actual need and not what we want to score on scorecards.
Yeah.
And typically the two processes don't meet each other. And that was perhaps my biggest finding, is that, even for a fairly organized business during these riots, if the business owner had, for instance, lost their computers, had lost their POS system, banks were closed for a good 2 or 3 weeks after that. Getting through to some of the business suites at the best of times was just a monster. So, you're trying to now scrabble with statements and prove that you were in business before and the like. The tricky part now comes into saying, how does that person meet your want for specifically structured templates of information when they are dealing in a very dynamic environment? So that, for me, was perhaps the most glaring, inefficiency in how those who needed assistance and those who could assist saw each other and could come together at the table. The second, for me, was that, the second thing that I specifically also saw as something we could improve on and do better at as part of being that particular system, was that in promoting governance, structure, process, and systems, there is not nearly enough information available to the SME sector on how to protect themselves. Many small business owners have registered entities and companies, but don't understand the full extent of what limited liability means in the context of that PTY Ltd in what they have structured there. Many young businesses don't understand how to approach their creditors. When the private number comes through, it's easier to call the bank when you're in the flood, not avoid them until you've escaped the flood, because you're in the flood together, and know that there's actually help, there's recourse, there's reprieve for them in those particular systems and processes that they're already using on a day-to-day basis. To the shock of many SMEs, they discovered there was a thing in South Africa called Sazria. Everybody's like, Haibo. This thing. How come, this is the first Haibo?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, in the middle of the crisis, everybody is trying now to scrabble with information. So I think that's also very much brought to, and heightened in my own mind is that even small businesses that, are led by fairly experienced individuals, learned individuals who have traveled through corporate even before they became entrepreneurs, in a crisis, they didn't know how to use services and solutions that are actually freely available to them. And that is also something that it's a huge indictment, I think, often, particularly in our public institutions, that those services, those resources, those tools are not something they regularly put into the public discourse so that people know that those are available for them to use. So for me, those were definitely two areas that, came up, and they are going to continue to present us with challenges and impediments because suddenly it's new or it's overwhelming because you're already dealing with destruction, to now interface with that available help, but also with this demand for governance and systemic information when you are in the middle of the fire. Yeah.
It's difficult to kind of decide which bags do you pack in the middle of the fire,
Yeah.
right? So just look at the chats in the comments here. Makesa, I see you. And Makesa was saying, thank you so much, Selebogo, for talking about trust. Sibongile, I see your question around the criteria to follow to access funding. I'm going to pause on that question because we'll address it in our panel discussion towards the end of the day. And then there's been a few other questions that have come through around the Linkage Platform in terms of, is it just a push through information, or can we pull information on it, and just the different kinds of compliance that's required? And I'll say to you, go play on the platform, go look around, see how the platform works. It's user-friendly, it's very interactive. So go take time to look at that, and then a lot of hand claps and thank yous for the insights that you're sharing. Selebogo, I'd like to come back to you and, just on Lynette's point around people not knowing what they needed and not knowing how to use certain things is the importance of insurance, right? So what has your guys' experience been with insurance? How has it, showed up exactly when you joked earlier about, haven't had the opportunity to pay your first premium yet. But what is the context that you find yourself, and why should SMEs take insurance seriously?
It's so critical. When we opened our first shop in December, the very first weekend when we opened in Benoni, we had installed gas cylinders and an entire thing at the back. And they came and took it.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we were insured, so we could go through a claiming process, and that could have been replaced. But if we had to pay cash for it, we know that would have ended up.
Yeah.
In another matter, I've organized a trip in the past, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, as THUD to Zimbabwe. We normally do these startup tours just to get entrepreneurs exposed to the SADC region. And we took out our insurance and did everything that was necessary here in South Africa. We got into Zimbabwe. When we were coming back, we got into an accident with a truck. And that cover meant nothing in that country. Whether it's personal insurance or against the car or anything like that, it meant nothing. You had to admit that you were in the wrong and everything else. That meant we had to carry that cost, including people who were injured. And it took about 16 hours with our colleagues to get back to South Africa. It was really a heroic experience. Just looking at that, we could have done a bit more homework to understand the environment of the country that we're going to and what type of insurance actually covers, and what we can do in case we don't have the cover that we need or the assistance that we need, So it just goes back to the point that I cannot stress it enough. It'll be a huge struggle for a lot of people to get back up just purely because they were not insured, and paying that extra 3,000-4,000 rand is better than having to go and find R1 million somewhere just to start again. Starting again is one of the hardest things to do for any business owner, because also psychologically you're going through your own things. I remember when we're going through when the looting was happening in Soweto, I really kind of shut down, and you need to know that you've put processes in place to cover you for such that you can actually break down if you need to, so that you can get back up and then find your space and lead again accordingly. But had we not done the proper due diligence and covered the bases, especially around insurance and stuff, would be talking a different story today. And there's accountabilities. Like,
Yes.
how are you accountable to your own business? Like, why didn't you see these things? You know, there's a lot of that.
Yeah, I like that phrase on due diligence, and I think that really speaks to whether business is playing small or big.
Yeah.
And I think even if you're a small business, even if it's just an idea, even if you've just started, is to assume that you're going to grow and to assume that you're going to be a big business that has impact, and to have those things in place, you know. And I think with this unrest, I don't think people were anticipating it. I don't think South Africans thought that this could happen. I think at the most that we've seen is xenophobic attacks, and I think the way that those have happened previously wasn't in the same context where a lot of major SMEs were disrupted at the same time, you know, on a national scale. So thinking about your business as a serious enterprise and kind of putting those systems and processes in place in the beginning. Lynette, I want to put you on the spot here and say top of mind, free resources that entrepreneurs can literally, Google is your best friend, just go type those in and they will pop up, go find the help, go find the assistance, go get your affairs in order.
Top of mind where they can go right now.
Yes.
Sure, you really are.
I mean, and even if it's just, you know, somebody's like, okay, my house is not in order, let me get things together, right? And I think sometimes people kind of are hesitant because they think they need to be spending lots of money to get accounting in place, to get whatever it is in place. And there's free resources that exist online.
Okay, so top of mind, your bank. Most of our banks in the country who bank our SMEs have business divisions with both pre-investment and business solutions linked to your account. And top of mind for me, it's to go check what package you're on in your business account, and then check if your business account has access to free accounting systems, has access to, for instance, things like your BBBE affidavits, you can get them to the bank, has access to the bank assisting you with even your SARS registration, and making sure that you know, reminders are set and that sort of thing on your I'm looking for the word, on your payments as they are required, whether it's PAYE, it's your VAT and the like. Use those business suites. You're paying for it and it's part of your monthly premium. So definitely I always just say to people, dig.
Yeah.
Dig. And, you know, your bankers in those institutions, for instance, are also specifically paid not just to, you know, transact and send you confirmation letters and talk to you when you've missed a payment on asset finance or whatever. They are also advisors to your business, because their survival is also dependent on your ability to continue to make deposits. So use that world of institutional knowledge to help you build. We often only go to those experts, particularly in that field where there's a problem, but they're actually available even when there isn't a problem to share information. And as part of the relationship building, we should be talking to whoever's responsible for our account and many diverse sources of not just information, but also resources on our apps and the like to get that information. So that, for me, always top of mind. You're paying for it, tap into it.
Completely, I absolutely agree with that. And don't be nervous, guys. You can walk into any branch and ask and be like, hey, can I please have a meeting with the SME manager, the business manager, whatever it is, and they will assist you. We are speaking about Rise Up SA and responding to during the time of crisis. If you have any questions that you haven't posed, I do have the app open. Click on the Q&A at the top and put your question in there. We've got about 10 minutes left before we wrap up this panel. So if there's anything we haven't spoken about that you'd like for us to address, please put that in there. Hepsy, I'd like to ask you, I think we talk a lot about what corporates need to be doing, but I understand that there's a bridge, and we need to think about how do we bridge the SMEs to the corporates, right? What are some key things that need to happen for us to be able to close that gap and to make sure that SMEs are sort of where we need them to be and corporates also meeting us halfway? Okay.
So I think there's an important aspect that we have to reflect on, and that is there's horses for courses. So in the broader ESD ecosystem, there are various players, and they all are contributing towards the ecosystem at large. So I could be looking at it from a perspective of a corporate because I'm familiar with the corporate environment. Lynette could be looking at it from a perspective of small businesses. Lebu can be looking at that from a perspective of a an individual entrepreneur or, or a broader team. The point is that for us to be able to collaborate and work together, it can't be from one perspective.
Yeah.
No.
So if a corporate says, I do need these documents, some of these are beyond their control. It's part of their license to trade, so they need to provide that. So how then do I meet Lynette who's saying, on the ground, we're having really difficulties with these documents? Because if we're going to be very insistent that for it to work, only this approach, then we're not going to find each other.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is to bridge that. And you want, as an SME, to work with a corporate, understand what the corporate struggles with. So let's, as the ecosystem, particularly with the ecosystem itself, we can work together to say, okay, Lynette, so now I understand that these documents are the last issues that an SME is looking at when they want to deal with the corporate. That's a different discussion. It doesn't stop us from engaging corporate. It doesn't stop corporate from supporting SMEs. But it must be from a perspective that they understand. So what I want to bring in that is that perspective that most SMEs don't have and have an appreciation of. But it doesn't mean that we cannot come together at the table and understand that. So I think that's the beauty of it, is that the ecosystem needs to be active. We need to work together as a collective and need to find solutions that speak and address the various players.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And that's a really good point, that there are various players,
Yes.
and we need to be solution specific, right? And it's not just about going, oh, well, here's a blanket approach and everyone should fit into this, but let's go specifically stage of business, type of business, level of business,
Customize it,
and customize the solutions on the offering. Before we wrap up the panel, I do like to have a call to action, so I'd like to give each of you, your call to action. If somebody's like, okay, I completely resonate, that's exactly where I'm going to go. How do people connect with you? What are sort of the different things that you have on offer that entrepreneurs can link up with each of you individually? And then also just, your one takeaway for SMEs. I think sometimes people listen to all the information and it's like, oh my goodness, I don't know where to go. What's your one learning that you think SMEs should definitely take away with this one particular thing? So I'll start with you, Hepsy, on the side.
Okay, I think the first thing I just want to say that the idea of Rise Up came up. I saw Lebu's WhatsApp profile, and that WhatsApp profile, he was showing his scooter from his shop being driven on the street, being pushed.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, gosh, what can I do to help? And I think we're in a very good position at the time that actually the platform, we're still building it and we're expanding on it, but the onboarding process of it is purely complete. Is completed. So I thought, as a small business myself, I understand how difficult it is to raise money from friends, family, enemies, and everybody else, because no one's going to give you that money, right? So I thought, I know that corporates are always willing to support. I can mobilize support from corporates, and I can go to all the people or all the corporates that I know. So what I want people to know is that my experience with corporates in general is that they are willing to help. And if you need any support, please do come to our platform. There are so many that we've already mobilized who are just waiting to support SMEs, particularly for those who've been impacted. But going forward, that's actually the approach that we want to take, to make sure that we mobilize as many corporates to work together and support SMEs within one platform. So please go to www.linkage.co.za. And I just look at what we offer there. There is no cost for an SME to register on it, but of course we are going to continuously improve on how that happens.
Thank you very much, Ntuli. Guys, it's open, it's active, we're still onboarding, all right? So www.linkage.co.za, and you can register there for free for support. Lynette, your call to action and one takeaway for SMEs.
Call to action, never waste a crisis. The crises that we have been in, I think, as SMEs, for particularly the last 2 years, have in many ways not only perhaps brought many of our businesses to our knees, but even the drivers, the jockeys behind those businesses to their own knees as well. And when I say never waste a crisis, take stock of yourself in terms of what your own strengths and weaknesses are, what your own capacity and your capabilities are. And then, even within the context of the business, look at the areas in which, your business could have done things differently. Are there things you could have done faster? Are there things that were necessary or not necessary? how could you have built in a different type of resilience? And I think for me, it's very important for us to take that stock, because as we go through these many, many setbacks, which are unforeseen and are uncontrollable, I think from the pieces, we need to pick up some of the things that we've seen and some of the things that we have learned, so that when it is time and the environment and is conducive to building sustainable businesses again, building legacy businesses again, and rebuilding the economy, with most of what we deem systems and things to be normal again, we can take some of those pieces and just remember to factor those things in to the foundations and the fundamentals of how we as individuals and business leaders want to move forward, but also how the businesses that we want to build are ultimately going to deliver value, impact those around us, as well as serve, not just serve also our own interests, but also serve the communities that we are in. Because I think particularly coming through this last year of the pandemic, the lockdowns, and now this unrest, what all of these issues have also very much brought up to the fore is that, the principles of being a socially responsive and responsible business are not just the problem of big blue chip South Africa or government. They are an us issue. Those were our neighbors, our cousins, people we grew up with, people we still interact with on a daily basis, who in some way or the other were either involved in the destruction of certain of the things or allowed certain things to happen without speaking up at the right time, or perpetuate systems that continue to increase the divide and the gaps to access and any inequality. So it forces you to say, when I rebuild a business now, how am I going to deliver impact? How am I going to serve differently? And how am I going to build a business of so much value in a society that umntu odlula ngendlela does not look at my business and say, I want to destroy you. Yeah.
Sure, that's powerful. Thank you for that. Selebogo, your call to action and one takeaway for SMEs?
I've been reflecting as the ladies have been talking. I'm a father to daughters. One is 15, the other one is 7. And the work that I do is about creating a safe space for them.
Yeah.
Whether I'm gone or not, we live in pandemic times. And what that means is that we've got to personalize this struggle and challenge that we're going through. Whether it's the pandemic or the bigger pandemic, which is poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And we have the highest in the world, which is quite scary, right? Having said that, opportunities are here because the biggest problems are here. Not one individual can solve them, but collectively there's so much we can do. There's so much opportunity to solve problems and make money out of it as entrepreneurs, And there isn't one single script that says this is the way that you're supposed to do it, right? I've pivoted into building businesses through community as an example, right? And why do I believe in that? Is because I want participation. I noticed that from when we used to host a lot of the THUD networking events, that on average in the room, there was more than 50% of the people who were there were actually corporate professionals who were running side hustles or wanted to understand better what is happening in the entrepreneurship space, right? And we're trying to bridge that gap and say, maybe the angel network that you want to use are the people around you. So let's educate each other. Let's make sure that we're finding ourselves in spaces where we are contributing to each other's success and we're doing it in a meaningful way, because if we don't, the unfortunate thing is what has happened is going to happen again. Why? Because we've got a large demographic of young people who are sitting at home. If you look at young men in townships, I'm in townships a lot, right? If you look at a lot of the young people who are there, they've got a lot of energy, and that energy is not being spent. And as a result, it's going to get destructive. And the cycles are going to get shorter and shorter. So we each have a responsibility to make sure that we build up and we contribute and we find ways to engage them meaningfully. So let's not find ourselves in spaces where we are talking at them. We must engage with them because they've got brains. Some of them are unemployed graduates. In fact, a lot of them, they've gone to school, they were sold a system and it didn't work out. Let's try and solve these problems together. Thank you.
I completely agree with that. Let us solve the problems together and also understand the people who we're wanting to engage oftentimes have the solutions themselves. I see you guys commenting online. Shomi was asking around breaking down access to markets, and we'll chat about that when we answer questions later on. There's a question here, I think also in linking to access to markets. There's a comment that was put in here from Sasol. So if you want more information around linkage, please send an email to info.esd@sasol.com. And that's one way that we're helping and supporting with access to markets. And then there's a question here from Nompilo who wants to know if business plans are really necessary. And Selebogo, I'm going to throw that to you when you do the pitching session. So hopefully you'll touch on business plans and do we still use them? Are they still necessary when you talk about pitching? But thank you so much to each of my panelists for joining us and sharing your insights. But also thank you so much for the work that you're doing to support SMEs on the ground practically and in ways that actually work. And we really appreciate you supporting us and moving us forward. And I'd like to invite each of you to please find them on social media, connect on LinkedIn, keep the conversation going. And thank you very much, Hepsy Mkhungo, who is the founder and CEO of One Linkage. Thank you very much, Lynette Ntuli, who is the CEO and founder of Innate Investment Solutions. And thank you so much, Selebogo Molefe, who is the CEO and co-founder of THUD and the People's Stokvel. I appreciate you joining me. We can exit on the stage. While you exit on the stage, I'll let everybody, give us hand claps in the chat section on the group. And I see your hands, your hand emojis coming on here. Thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated.